The first time I really saw my brother in years, he was sitting on the curb outside the high school, lacing up a pair of rollerblades. It was a Tuesday. I know it was a Tuesday because I had just finished my AP Bio study group, and my brain was still buzzing with the Krebs cycle, a beautiful, ordered loop of logic and efficiency. My life was a series of beautiful, ordered loops. School, then practice, then dinner, then studying, then bed. Rinse, repeat. Gold stars, principal's list, captain of the varsity soccer team. I was the one Mom and Dad pointed to at parties, the one they whispered about with a mix of pride and relief. Asterisk, and this is our oldest, Alex. Never gives us a moment's worry. Asterisk. Leo, on the other hand, was the worry. He was the reason for the tight lines around Mom's mouth, the reason Dad's shoulders slumped when he came home. Leo, with his dyed black hair that was now fading to a murky green, his combat boots in June, and his sneer that he seemed to practice in the mirror. He was 17, a year younger than me, but he felt like a stranger from a different species. I walked past him on the curb, my backpack heavy with textbooks. He didn't look up. "Leo," I said. It wasn't a greeting. It was an acknowledgement of an obstacle. He finished tying his lace, a frayed, neon yellow thing. He finally looked at me. His eyes, once the same clear blue as mine, were now bloodshot and guarded. "Alex," he mimicked my tone. "Off to cure cancer? Or just practice your acceptance speech for valedictorian?" I felt the familiar prickle of irritation. The defense mechanism. Study group. Some of us have priorities. He stood up, wobbling slightly on the wheels. "Yeah. Priorities. I have one right now, actually. It's called getting the hell out of here." And with a push, he glided away, a dark silhouette against the manicured green lawn of the school, his movements jerky and unpracticed, nothing like the graceful, confident skater he'd tried to be years ago. That was it. That was the moment the crack appeared. It wasn't a dramatic fight or a tearful confession. It was just the wheels. Rollerblades. He used to be so good. When we were kids, we had a pair each. We'd race around the cul-de-sac, Leo always pushing faster, trying to catch me, his gleeful shrieks echoing off the houses. He'd fall, scrape his knees, and get right back up, laughing. That was Leo. The one who laughed. I didn't think about it then. I tucked the image away, a file to be processed later, and walked home to my neatly ordered room. The second time I saw him, really saw him, was a week later. It was past midnight. I was coming back from Jake's house. We'd been working on our calc final project, but also, his parents were out of town. There was a girl there, Maya, from the drama club. She had laughed at something I said, and her hand had brushed mine when we reached for the same bag of chips. For a few hours, I wasn't the golden child. I was just a guy, feeling a flutter in his chest. It was terrifying and exhilarating. I was floating on that feeling when I quietly unlocked the front door, letting myself into the dark, silent house. I crept up the stairs, my mind still replaying Maya's smile. As I passed Leo's room, I heard it. A sound so raw and broken it stopped me cold. It was a sob, but not a loud one. It was the kind of sob you swallow, the kind that gets trapped in your throat and comes out as a strangled, animal-like gasp. The door was slightly ajar. I shouldn't have looked. I know I shouldn't have. But I did. He was sitting on the floor, his back against his bed. He wasn't wearing his usual armor of band tees and ripped jeans. He was in an old, too small pajama shirt with spaceships on it. A relic from a decade ago. His head was in his hands, and his shoulders shook with the force of his silent crying. On the floor next to him was a framed photograph, face down. I knew that frame. It was the one from his desk, the one that used to hold a picture of him and his best friend, Sam. Sam, who had moved away last year. The official story was that Leo had behavioral issues and pushed everyone away. The unofficial story, the one whispered by Dad, was that Sam's family had probably just had enough of Leo's bad influence. He hadn't heard me. I could have walked away. I could have filed it away under Leo being dramatic and gone to bed. But I didn't. I stood there, frozen, watching my brother fall apart. And for the first time, I didn't see the black sheep. I saw a little boy in a spaceship pajama shirt, utterly alone, mourning the loss of his best friend. The friend I'd heard him laughing with on the phone for years, before the laughter stopped. The friend who was the last person, I realized with a jolt, that I'd ever seen Leo truly happy with. A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. It wasn't pity. It was the beginning of understanding, and it was terrible. The third time was the worst. It was a Saturday, and the whole ugly scene played out in the bright, unforgiving light of the kitchen. Leo had been out all night. He stumbled in at 9 a.m., his hair a mess, smelling of stale smoke and something sweet and cloying. Dad was at the table, reading the paper, a fortress of calm. Mom was at the counter, pretending to organize the mail, her movements sharp and brittle. Well, the prodigal son returns, Dad said, not looking up from his paper. The sarcasm was a blade. Leo grunted, heading for the stairs. Don't you walk away from me, young man. Dad's voice cracked like a whip. Leo stopped. Where were you? Out. Out where? With those people you call friends? Dad's lip curled. They're my friends, yeah. Leo's voice was flat. Friends who get you into trouble? Friends who are a bad influence? We've had this conversation, Leo. You are better than this. Or you could be, if you tried. That's when Mom turned around. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. We were worried sick, Leo. We didn't know if you were dead in a ditch somewhere. Her voice broke. Do you have any idea what that's like? To lie awake, wondering if your son is okay? Alex never puts us through this. Never. It was the comparison. It always came back to the comparison. And Leo, for the first time, didn't sneer or storm off. He just looked at her, and in his eyes I saw a flash of something I'd never seen before. A deep, soul-crushing weariness. And then it was gone, replaced by the familiar armor. Sorry to disappoint, he muttered. Guess you should have just had one. He turned and walked up the stairs. Dad shook his head and went back to his paper. Mom pressed her fingers to her temples. And I just sat there at the kitchen island, my organic chemistry textbook open in front of me, the diagrams of benzene rings swimming before my eyes. Asterisk Alex never puts us through this. Never, asterisk. The words echoed in my head, not as a compliment, but as an accusation. An indictment of everything I had unknowingly, willingly, participated in. The spaceship pajamas. The silent sobs. The rollerblades on the curb. The dead, weary look in his eyes. The puzzle pieces started to fall into place, not in the neat, orderly way of a biological pathway, but in a horrifying, chaotic cascade. I was the measuring stick they used to beat him. My successes were the highlighters used to mark his failures. Every gold star I earned was a little bit of darkness cast his way. Every time Mom and Dad beamed at me, they were, in that same moment, finding him wanting. I wasn't just the golden child. I was the warden of his prison, and I didn't even know I was holding the keys. I thought about my own carefully curated life. The pressure was immense, yes. But I had a team, a future, a Maya who smiled at me. What did Leo have? A room full of memories of a friend who left, and a family who saw him only as a problem to be solved, a disappointment to be managed. That night, I didn't study. I sat on my bed, the perfect grades on the wall suddenly looking like trophies from a war I didn't know I was fighting. Around 1 a.m., I heard the familiar, soft click of Leo's window. He was sneaking out. On impulse, I got up and quietly opened my own door. I saw his silhouette at the end of the hall, one leg already out the window that led to the porch roof. "Leo," I whispered. He froze. Then slowly turned. In the dim light from the street lamp, his face was a mask of suspicion. "What?" I didn't have a plan. I didn't have words. I just walked towards him. He tensed, ready for a lecture, ready to be turned in. I stopped a few feet away. "Sam," I said. "The picture on your floor. You miss him." His mask slipped. Just for a second. A flash of pain, raw and open. Then the walls were back up. "What do you know about it?" "Nothing," I admitted. "I don't know anything." "I'm sorry." He stared at me, completely thrown. The word sorry from the golden child must have sounded like a foreign language. "For what?" he asked, his voice laced with a bitter, defensive curiosity. "For never asking. For never seeing." I took a shaky breath. "For being the one they compare you to. For all of it." He didn't say anything for a long moment. The silence was thick, heavy with years of unspoken resentments. Then, he did the last thing I expected. He let out a short, choked laugh that was half a sob. He looked away, out the window at the dark street. "It's not your fault they're like that," he said, his voice rough. "You didn't ask for it any more than I did." It was the first gracious thing I'd ever heard him say. And it broke me. "I'm going to talk to them," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "Tomorrow. I'm going to tell them to stop. To just stop." He looked back at me, and for the first time in years, I saw a flicker of the old Leo. The one who laughed on rollerblades. He looked skeptical, wary, but underneath it, there was a tiny, fragile spark of something else. Hope. "They won't listen," he said, but it wasn't a dismissal. It was a warning. "I know," I said. "But they're going to hear it. From me. For once." He held my gaze for a second longer, then gave a single, small nod. He turned and slid out the window, disappearing into the night. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty space where he'd been. The next morning at breakfast, the scene was set. Mom was making pancakes, my favorite, a reward for another perfect week. Dad was already discussing college applications with me, the usual litany of Ivy League possibilities. Leo was noticeably absent. "Is Leo eating?" I asked. Mom's smile tightened. "He's sleeping in. Again. We'll deal with him later." "No," I said. My voice was calm, but it cut through the breakfast chatter like a knife. Both of them looked at me. "We'll deal with him now." Dad put down his coffee cup. "Excuse me?" I took a deep breath, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was harder than any final exam, any championship game. "I want you to stop." "Stop what, honey?" Mom asked, her voice taking on that placating tone she used when she thought I was being overly sensitive. "Stop comparing him to me. Stop holding me up as the example of what he should be." My voice was shaking, but I forced the words out. "You're killing him. Do you understand that? Every time you say Alex never does this, you're telling him he's worthless." Dad's face hardened. "Alex, you don't know what you're talking about. This is between your mother and me and Leo. We're trying to help him. By making him feel like a failure every single day?" I shot back, my own surprise mirroring theirs. I'd never spoken to them like this. "He's not a problem to be solved. He's a person. He's my brother. He's your son. And you don't even see him. You see a project that isn't turning out the way you planned. That's enough." Dad slammed his hand on the table, making the plates jump. "You will not speak to us like that. You have no idea the sacrifices we've made for him. The worry, the stress. The worry he feels every single day?" I interrupted, my own anger rising to meet his. The stress of knowing that his own parents are disappointed in his very existence. Do you know what I saw last night? I saw him crying over a picture of his best friend who moved away. And he was alone. Completely alone. Because we've all made him feel like he's not worthy of our time unless he's fixing himself. The kitchen fell silent. The only sound was the faint sizzle of the forgotten pancake on the griddle. Mom's face was ashen. Dad looked stunned. Like I'd just told him the sky was green. Just then, a sound came from the doorway. A soft, incredulous sound. We all turned. Leo was standing there, in his ripped jeans and a faded t-shirt. He must have heard everything. His eyes were wide, his mouth slightly open. He looked from me, to our parents, and back to me. The mask was completely gone. He just looked, shell-shocked. The silence stretched, agonizing and complete. Then, Leo did something that shocked us all. He walked over to the kitchen table, pulled out a chair, and sat down. He looked at the empty plate in front of him, then at my mom. "Those pancakes burnt?" he asked, his voice hoarse. It was such a small, mundane question. But it was a question. An olive branch. A tiny, tentative step into the light. Mom, tears streaming silently down her face, just shook her head and went to the griddle. She scraped off the burnt one and started a new one. For Leo. Dad sat back in his chair, the fight gone out of him. He looked at Leo, really looked at him, for what felt like the first time in years. He didn't say he was sorry. He didn't know how. But the silence wasn't angry anymore. It was heavy with a dawning, painful awareness. And me? I sat there, the golden child who had just melted his own crown. My hands were still shaking. My heart was still racing. My perfect, ordered life was